Oh, I wasn't expecting anyone yet. I don't actually have a name for the channel yet, and if you're here though, we must have figured that out. Let me check with someone. Hold on just a second. Keith, did you invite all these people here?
Hey, Bruce. Nope, it wasn't me. Wait, we have people here already? Huh.
Yep, they're all watching. Did you post our first video yet?
Nope, it wasn't me.
Is that all you're going to say today?
Nope, Okay. I promise I will actually say other words besides nope, it wasn't me.
Okay then, but we still need to figure this out. If I didn't post the first episode and you didn't, then who did? And what's the name of the channel?
Those are great questions, and I'm going to take a stab at this. I think I know the answer. Either future Keith or future Bruce did it. Those guys are awesome.
I think you might be onto something here. Future Us came up with a name and posted episode 1. But how do we confirm it?
I know. I'll make sure we get a logo, and whenever it's finished, I'll just put it on the TV screen. That way it's easy for us to find.
Something just popped on your screen over there.
Awesome!
Keith, can I get a closer look? Can you maybe roll it over to me?
You want to check it out? Here you go.
Dads Talk Tech. Huh, that has a nice ring to it.
And you know what else has a nice ring to it? Our launch sponsor and the creator of our logo graphics, Modern Yellow. So Dominic over at Modern Yellow did a fantastic job of taking our concepts and turning it into a real professional logo. Really appreciated it. And Modern Yellow also does a bang up job with custom professional websites. So highly recommended. You really can't go wrong.
Let's talk a little bit about the kind of content the channel is going to contain. The short answer is technology.
Yeah, and that relatively broad definition will really allow us to explore this space, right? We'll cover a wide range of topics that are of interest to Bruce and I, and we'll see where that leads us. Now, if some of those topics resonate with you or future subscribers and you like certain topics more than others, we'll take that into account and do more of those. And some of these episodes that we do may end up being one-offs, and that's fine.
Also, technology has experienced an incredible amount of convergence over the years. You probably see that in your everyday life as well. Devices that used to be single purpose and not connected are now connected or serve many purposes. A good example of this is cell phones. At first, you could talk on the phone with a cell phone. Then you could send a text message like a dedicated beeper. And then after that, you could take photos. And then you could send those photos to your friends through integrated data services. And so now those phones are no longer called cell phones, they're smartphones. And they're dedicated, powerful computers that just happen to also be able to make phone calls. Along with introducing myself and Keith, we wanted this episode to serve as an inside view of a channel launching from the ground up. Not from an expert point of view looking back, but literally as an observer from the ground floor at launch time. Maybe some of you are considering doing the same thing, or maybe you're just wondering what that looks like.
So before we talk about the how we did this channel and deep dive that, maybe we should spend a little bit of time talking about the why.
Sure. I've been in technology for over 30 years now, and frankly been interested in technology all of my life. Along with being a person interested in technology, I also enjoy creating things. I can remember as a kid digging in the trash finding whatever I could in order to make whatever I could. My first computer was actually a Commodore VIC-20. Yes, I know that's dating me, and many of you don't even know what that is, but that's fine. Back in the day when you got a VIC-20, there were some programs and games available for them, but mostly what you did was you went out to the bookstore and you bought a book that had programs typed out in it, and you would type those programs in yourself and try and make them work. Part of the challenge is many times there were errors actually in the programs that were published, and so you had to debug those and make them work, or you introduced typos yourself. That was part of the experience and the feeling of accomplishment when you were done. That VIC-20 was an early influencer on my future career choice. I just didn't know it at the time. Speaking of influencers, how could I talk about the why without mentioning some of them? People like Peter McKinnon, Jared Polin, his inspirational first video that he tried to do, Tony and Chelsea Northrup, Potato Jet, Linus Tech Tips, Gerald Undone, and DLSR Shooter, and many, many more. I like all of these YouTubers' content, and I think Keith enjoys many of them as well. I say that to acknowledge that as good of friends as Keith and I are, we are different when it comes to technology, and we think that's one of the things that's going to really work on this channel. Different views on the same topics and technology. Just as the influencers I mentioned all have different styles and content, but that is something that we love about YouTube. We will have links to all of their channels, not because they need the traffic from us, but because we think they're all worth a visit if you're not familiar with them. Another influencer is not actually a YouTuber at all. Randy Posh was a professor that delivered what is now known as the last lecture back in 2007. He was at Carnegie Mellon, and he had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and so he delivered this now famous last lecture. There's a lot of takeaways from that video, but one of the things that really has stuck with me is the concept of a head fake, or the idea that people come looking for one thing and then get something completely different in return. I think entertaining people while they're being educated is very, very powerful. I'm putting a link to the last lecture below, and although it's very long, I think it's definitely worth a watch. Keith, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in technology?
Yeah, sure. No, yeah, that's interesting, your story about the VIC-20, because when we first met in high school, I think you were already onto a Commodore 64, so I think I missed that whole phase. But now that's interesting that all of this was a result of you getting bit by a radioactive VIC-20 of all things. My journey is a little bit different, and although not entirely different, we had early computers in the house when I was growing up. Our first computer was a K-Pro 2, and we called it Calvin, because my mom likes to name things, as do I. So Calvin K-Pro. And it was this fascinating machine. It was really like the size of a giant suitcase, and it was meant to be portable. It had a handle, but it was super heavy, and the handle part would detach and literally become the keyboard and kind of expose a floppy drive and a little monitor. It was really interesting. Maybe we can throw a picture on the overlay here, but that was interesting. And then my dad from his office would bring home an Apple II, so one of the early-ish Apple computers from his work, and it was for the office, but he would bring it home on weekends occasionally, and I would play with that too. And really all I did was write some programs, some very basic things, or to be precise, I wrote very simple programs in the language of BASIC. So I did that, and I played a lot of karateka or karateka, however it's pronounced. So that was good for me. It was. I won't say it wasn't influential, but I would not reference it as something that sparked my interest in the field of computing and launched me into this career. It wasn't that. Maybe it just wasn't radioactive. But for me, getting deep into a technology and becoming highly credible in a certain area and focus really didn't happen. Maybe in undergrad a little bit, but really grad school. And then once I launched my career in the CAE industry, then I got super deep into very specific areas of computer-aided engineering. But really, as a dad, my motivation for how I relate with tech is kind of the way my dad relates to things. And we had this discussion. I'm not a hobby guy. I'm more of a project guy. And that's what really, if there's a topic that I'm interested in, if it's a topic that is a project that I'm interested in, and it involves technology, then I'm all in, right? That's kind of my gate. Now, as a dad, one of the projects that a lot of dads get put on their plate is photographing, right? And so I knew nothing about photography, really, before I became a dad, because of what I just said. I had a reason to become interested, and then I got all into it. So that's kind of it. Now, my motivations, there's kind of like two buckets of motivation for me in terms of friends and family. So the first is Bruce, right? We've been good friends for a long time, and unfortunately, I live in Michigan and he lives in Nebraska, right? That's that's big. That's a big distance. And now, especially that we're getting older a little bit, I'm always looking for opportunities and situations and scenarios that allow us to interact more frequently. So that's a goal of mine, and this YouTube channel definitely checks that box, right? So that's one motivation. Another motivation is family oriented, right? It's all about learning for me. Like, I love to learn, and I love to put myself in situations where I need to learn, and I do learn. My goal, to make it completely personal, there's a lot of technology that, I'm here and Bruce is here. And in certain areas, the opposite. But I know that by prepping for certain, sessions and episodes, that I'm going to have to research and I'm going to learn things, and that's great. And I want to be able to pass what I call the grandma test. I think that everybody who works in tech or in engineering or science, they already have had this experience where their grandma asks them, what do you do, right? And then you're like, okay, so then you explain it. And then you realize really how hard it is to explain, right? It's something that you take for granted. It's like trying to explain baseball to somebody who's never seen it before. You're like, wow, this is, what I do is actually a little bit hard to explain for people who don't have the fundamentals. So, my goal is to keep up with all the different technology trends, understand them at a fundamental, not a super deep level, but enough to get it. My grandma, she doesn't really understand what I do for my career, and it's not because she's not intelligent. In fact, I'm quite certain that she's more intelligent than I am. But I want to be able to pass that test, right? I want to be able to talk to my grandchildren someday, ask them that question, what is it that you do? And then follow that up with a couple questions. And not only do I want to understand what that is, what they do, what it's all about, but I want them to know that I know, right? And so, that's another part of my long-winded story, but part of my motivation.
Okay, I think we've covered a good amount of the why, and now it's time we cover the how and really get to the tech topic of today's episode. We're going to spend a little time talking about the equipment that we're using as we launch our YouTube channel. Hopefully you like getting to see these things from the very start and find it interesting what we chose to purchase and what we already had on hand. I'm here to tell you I only purchased about $100 in new equipment to start the channel. And although I may have had some equipment on hand that you don't, it doesn't mean that you don't have what you need to get a channel started if that's what you're interested in doing. I'll also tell you that Keith purchased a little bit more equipment than I did because I had an interest in photography. So I had some stands, some lights, and the cameras and lenses on hand because of my hobby. Let me tell you this, the equipment that I do tell you about is equipment that I purchased myself for starting the YouTube channel. So none of the equipment was provided to us. None of it is sponsored. So these are items that we selected because we did some research and found equipment that we thought was going to be good for us to use for YouTube. I had a Canon 80D and several lenses because of my interest in photography and my desire to take quality images of my daughters participating in sports and dance and school and other events. The 80D is a decent camera today, but if you were going out to buy a new one, brand new, probably wouldn't be the one that you'd pick first and foremost. Just because it is now getting to be an older camera, there's probably some cameras from a cost and performance perspective are going to be a little bit better value. Doesn't mean it's not a good camera for YouTube. I think it's probably one of the more popular cameras over the years for creating YouTube content because of its features. The lens I'm using right now is a Canon EFS 24mm 2.8 lens. It's a great focal length for what I need to do for this video. As well, it lets lots of light in and gives me a nice slightly blurred background. Again, I've already mentioned I'm using a Canon 80D. And if I were going out and buying a video camera today brand new, I don't know that I would pick this one first and foremost, but it's still a really strong contender and it's worth using. Probably a great camera to pick up used. This camera is readily available used and probably represents a good value, especially if you're looking to get into the Canon ecosystem. Canon makes a large number of lenses and really high quality lenses that will work even on their latest mirrorless cameras. That being said, I'm probably looking at upgrading to whatever Canon releases to replace the Canon 80D at some point in time. One of the things that's kept me in the Canon camera is I'm used to the controls, I have a good collection of lenses, and so it makes sense for me to continue on using the Canon ecosystem. One of the ways that I've been able to get good quality lenses for less money is buying them used. Used lenses will save you some money, although lenses do hold their value fairly well. So the nice thing is you can buy a used lens, use it for a while, and if you don't like it anymore or you want something else, you can sell it, and you're probably not going to lose too much money, especially if you bought it used in the first place. You'll also find that there's no perfect camera out there, right? So it's a matter of finding a camera that has the features and functionality that you need for what you want to use it for and has a price point that you can afford. I think this is really a good place to have Keith talk about his camera equipment, and then we can discuss the accessories that we both bought, such as lights.
Yeah, so let's talk about camera equipment. What do I have? So I've had a few digital cameras over the years since my kids were born. And the camera that I'm using now is one that I bought about 5 years ago. We had a family trip, a vacation of a lifetime really, to Croatia and Budapest. And so I knew up front that I needed to step up my game photography-wise, and I bought what I consider my first big boy camera, let's call it. So I got a mirrorless, researched it like crazy at the time, and absolutely do not regret the choice whatsoever. It's a Sony a6000. It was a great camera, and I think is a great camera still to this day. Sony's done a very good job of maintaining it with updates. Really like the camera. So I'm filming with it right now, and although I have aggregated a few lenses over the years, and maybe we'll deep dive those in a different episode, but what I'm using right now is a fairly wide lens that allows me to capture, a significant part of my studio space here, and that is a 20 millimeter 2.8 lens. It's kind of it's a Sony lens, and it's a pancake kind of lens. So that's what I'm using. Basically a 5-year-old camera. The other thing that I'm using, or I'm about to use, I haven't actually captured footage for this channel yet with it, but I did buy this specifically for the channel, and bought this too. But anyway, this is the DJI Osmo Pocket, and again, I haven't really recorded much footage with this yet, but I do expect to. It's kind of a handheld camera, action camera slash camcorder. And it has a gimbal on it that's able to do face tracking and some interesting things. So I really am looking forward to using this in future episodes, or heck, maybe even later on in the same episode, I'm not sure. But between the DJI Osmo Pocket and my Sony a6000, that's what I've got.
So what you may or may not have heard from both me and Keith is we don't have the latest and greatest state-of-the-art camera equipment, and that's definitely okay. We think the most important thing is the content or ideas that you have first and foremost. It's nice to use the latest high quality gear, but it won't make your topics and presentation better. It just might look a little cleaner. Personally, I will watch good content that has average sound and video for longer than beautifully filmed 4K really bad content. As well, if you want to monetize your YouTube channel, again, focus on the content first, and monetization will happen as a byproduct of producing good content. I do recommend a microphone just because if your audio is poor, people won't be able to hear what you're saying. I personally purchased the TAKSTAR SGC 598 microphone. I also recommended that mic to Keith. As well, I have it on a boom arm, which is right above my head, and I already own the boom arm. Keith isn't done with his studio setup as of the writing of our script, but he is going to be using a cool space above his detached garage for his studio. As you can see, I don't have a studio, but the bar in my basement with equipment I can set up and tear down fairly easily. I do have my cameraman running the camera, but I'm not sure that guy is going to stick, so we'll have to see how that goes. We're planning to do a second part to this episode where we spend a bit more time going over the equipment. Don't worry, if you're not launching a YouTube channel, we'll also discuss how you can use this same equipment for other purposes at home. Keith, why don't you walk us through your studio setup?
Hey Bruce, yeah, let's talk about the Michigan studios. I thought I would start outside to give you all a context for the way the Michigan studio is set up. So as I go up the driveway here, let me flip around. And you can see in our neighborhood we have a lot of narrow lots with detached garages. We refinished our space up there a couple years back, And we decided real quickly that that would be where the studio would go. Apologies in advance. We do have a basketball hoop right outside. Could be noisy. Speaking of noisy, holy smokes, that's loud. That'll be a future episode. Hello, Percy the cow. Percy is the guardian of the Dad's Talk Tech Michigan studios. And as we walk in, you can kind of get an idea of what our space looks like. Got some tables, got some bean bags, got a couple thingies that we use as coffee tables. This is the computer that I use. It's a Nook 8th Gen Core i5, and we have a TV that we use as a TV, but also as my monitor. Got a nice couch that we can disassemble and reassemble into chairs and other things for certain episodes. I love that picture, the only decoration I have so far. And yeah, that's basically what we have. Now in future episodes, we'll go over some more equipment type of stuff. I'll do a deeper dive on my lighting setup. You see I have a Godox SL60W and a Softbox. We'll talk about that. And here is the Sony a6000 we talked about.
All right, well, if you made it this far into our first video, we want to thank you for hanging in there. We'll have links below to a number of the items that we showed today. Some of those items probably are not necessarily the ones that you'd want to purchase. The Canon 80D is probably getting a little long in the tooth and starting to show its age a little bit in terms of buying it new. But if you could pick one up used, it's a great camera for YouTube. The links we have below are affiliated links, so they will actually help the channel if you click on those. And even if you don't buy what we showed you today, buy anything from Amazon in the first 24 to 48 hours after using those affiliated links, even if it's not something that we recommended to you and the link that you followed, anything that you buy is actually going to help the channel. We certainly appreciate the support. Just a reminder, this is day 1 of our 7 episodes and 7 days marathon. Days 2 through 7 is really going to have a variety of different content to give you a good flavor of the type of the things that we're going to be looking at in the channel. We really haven't established a regular schedule yet, but right now I think what we can commit to is every other week releasing new content on Mondays. And then if we can push that schedule a little bit more and maybe do weekly content, we'll do that. But if you remember, we are both dads making this content on the side. So dad duties come first. If you like this video, please do the voodoo that you do and hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you get notification of when we release new content. And of course, this week is especially important because we have 6 new episodes coming in the next 6 days. Thanks again for joining us for episode 1, and we'll hopefully see you in the future.
Hey Lily, want to see some bloopers? I sure do. If you guys want to see some bloopers, hit the like, subscribe, and ring the bell.
Take 10. Also, technology has experienced an incredible amount of technology has experienced technology over the years.
Oh my God. Or engineering or any of those fields has had an opportunity.
Do you guys want to see some bloopers?
Just as the influencers I mentioned above, they can't see that it's above. All right, shake it off.
It wasn't me.